So if you look over here, this is the Datvacado, and that's right. Ladies, gentlemen, children, people of all ages, whatever designation you choose, it's Steve.0 or Steve squared, whatever you prefer. Anyway, here's the Datsun. Today our plan is to mock up the engine and transmission so that I can get working on fabricating some motor mounts, right? So the 304, the old engine out of the Hornet, for those of you who have been looking, the old engine out of the 304 over there, I don't know what is going on with it, but it continues to leak right past the drain plug in the oil pan. We've drained that engine. I let it sit with the oil plug out for like 2 days and it dripped, and then when it finally stopped, I put the plug back in, and then it leaked out another 3 or 4 quarts of oil somehow. It's almost like the oil vapors in this shop from engines running and stuff like that are just condensing and then draining out of that engine and onto the floor.
That sounds right.
Yeah, I don't know how many piles of oil dry I've put over there, but it's outrageous. Anyway, so for those of you, you may recognize this. This is the KA24 dual overhead cam 240SX engine that's going in the Datsun. Today we're going to hook it up to the 5-speed, which is over here on the shelf. We're going to swing it into the car, put in the cross member, and then get an idea of what the motor mounts are going to look like. Okay, so here's the transmission cross member I'm going to be using. There is I believe that's the part number. So this cross member, as well as the mount here, and this is the same transmission mount as many other transmissions, an energy suspension mount. Here's the hardware that came with the cross member itself. This part came from Z-Car Depot, which is an awesome website for different Datsun restoration, performance, and other parts like that. So this is a 3/8" steel plate, bent and all set up to just bolt right into the 510. And Nissan and Datsun transmissions all have just one bolt there in the middle, so this should fit the 240SX transmission that we're using. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to install the cross member and use this mount as a location device for the rest of the drivetrain. All right, got this thing almost set up. Looks like we're gonna have to come up a little bit more because it looks like dowel must go in that pinhole right there. Lift the transmission up.
This dowel started.
Okay, hold her tight there.
Yep.
There it is. If you hold that real quick, I'll see if I can't find some hardware. Probably would have been wise to find some hardware before we did that. For those of you watching, no, you don't ever get better at this stuff. You just keep doing the same stupid shit you used to do. Okay, that's good enough. We can blow the shifter off here. Okay. Oh, there's all kinds of fun grease in there. Okay, we're gonna get her up in the air, swing it in. We're gonna have to move some lines out of it.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, there's some brake lines, clutch lines. You guys tell that this thing hasn't had working marker lights in a very long time. I don't know if you can see that. Look how rusted the inside of that is. This car came from Florida. All right, so if you look under here, this is the transmission. The engine is bolted to it. They're both hanging from the engine crane right now. This is that cross member. It's probably kind of a little light under here. Sorry, guys. So the 240SX transmission just has 2 through bolts to mount the transmission mount to the transmission itself. So I'm gonna really quickly connect that mount to the transmission, and then we're gonna use the transmission cross member, the bolt hole for that, as a locator to get this thing put in the car where it needs to be, and then we'll check the shifter hole and all that stuff after that. All right, don't mind the air conditioner noise. I'm not gonna change anything about it, but look, KA24 and the 5-speed transmission is in the Datsun. That was a little bit of a struggle to get this thing in here. The front end of these cars, from the core support to the cowl, is really short. So, long story short, we have the engine resting on a 1x4. Let's see down here, between the engine and the engine cross member, we have a 1x4 piece of wood, about 3/4 of an inch thick. The reason we did that is to just get the engine to rotate this way, because from the factory, KAs actually don't sit straight up and down. They lean to the driver's side a little bit. That's what gets the shifter mounting location to be level. So right now, we're going to jack up the engine just a little bit to pull that spacer out and put like a 1/4 inch piece of steel or something between the oil pan and the cross member. That should lower the engine down in the front. And if that doesn't give us enough clearance or get this closer to being like, you know, closer to dead level, then we may look into potentially unbolting the cross member and spacing it down. However, I wonder what that would do with the control arms, because the control arms mount to that. So if you space the cross member down, you might change the geometry. However, the whole front end of this Datsun is going to be 280ZX parts with coilovers anyway, and probably camber plates on top. So next step here, we're going to try to get that space to be a little bit closer to the cross member. All right, so here we are. There is the engine and transmission mocked up in the engine bay. We've measured this thing to be as close to dead on straight, level, and centered in the car. The downward angle of the engine right now is at approximately 2.5 to 3 degrees, which is as far as we could get it. We do have the cross member spaced down 1/8 of an inch, and currently the engine is sitting, the oil pan is sitting on an 1/8 inch spacer right above the cross member. So the next step, next thing I'm going to do is create motor mount plates that will bolt to the side of the engine block, and then I will weld mounts onto the cross member on either side. So at this point, the shifter location ends up being just a little bit far forward. You can see, probably can't see the last bolt hole here, so I will have to enlarge this shifter hole just a little bit. But the rest of this transmission tunnel and up against the firewall there, we actually have tons of room. The cross member that I got from Z-Car Depot fit really well and put the transmission in a really good spot. So we have the engine pushed as far back in the engine bay as we can, and we have pretty good clearance. It might get a little tight over here with the turbo manifold up against the steering box, so I probably will go with a top mount setup. Otherwise, this thing is looking pretty good. So next time you see the car, I'll be starting work on the motor mounts. It's a couple weeks later from the last video we shot, but this is still relevant. So today I'm going to finish up fabricating the motor mounts. Last time you saw it, you guys saw the engine in here. It's all centered up and it's as flat as we can get it without notching the cross member any further. So over here, here's what I'm going to use. So this is a bushing kit. Basically, it's a piece of 2-inch OD DOM steel tubing, and then a 2-piece polyurethane bushing that goes in either side, and then a sleeve in the middle. The idea here, I can weld to this. So my plan is, using the factory frame brackets right here, I have a piece of 1/4 inch thick, 4-inch bar stock here. I'm gonna lay this plate over, transfer the bolt pattern, and then cut this off. I'll take the other engine bracket, lay it on the rest of this piece, transfer the bolt holes, cut it off, drill them, and then I'll have 2 plates that mount to the block. After that, I'll cut this piece of, I think this is like 1.5 inch 90 wall DOM tubing. I got this from a friend of mine who's a circle track racer. That pipe will go between the engine block plate and the bushing that's going to be mounted using tabs like these to the cross member. Kind of how the cross member used to be. I actually cut off tabs that look just like this. So these tabs, let's see, these tabs right here, 1/4 inch thick. I got these from a local circle track race shop. I don't know exactly how tall they are. They're kind of short. So if you look at this right here, if you look at how much space there is underneath that, and you don't need a ton, but I don't know if I'm going to end up using these tabs or this taller set of tabs that I ordered on Amazon. I will have a link in the description for this bushing kit. I will also have a link in the description for these tabs. I'm not sure which one I like better. These taller tabs right here will stand this motor mount off of the cross member just a little bit, which will hopefully maybe reduce the amount of pipe we have to use. I'm gonna get these traced and drilled and cut, and then I'm gonna mock up or measure how much pipe I need and get those cut, and then we're gonna get to actually mocking this up. So this is the passenger side mount right here. All I'm gonna do with this is essentially trace the bolt pattern onto this plate so that I can re-drill these holes and cut this thing off. Same procedure. You've probably seen this 100 times. And I am gonna punch these holes out just a little bit large. This is just the plate that's gonna bolt to the block. There's the bolt pattern of this plate right there. And I'll mark it somewhere right here, cut it off, and then I'll drill those holes. I'll do the same thing for the other plate right there, and then I'll cut it over there, have a little bit left over. Okay, so I've got my 2 plates marked out. This one's marked passenger side, this one's marked driver side. I'm gonna make this cut, drill these 4 holes, and I'll pick back up after that. So, I think these plates are gonna work. It's passenger, driver. I am gonna go mock up the passenger side plate really quick just to make sure I don't have to enlarge these holes anymore. And then I'll probably buzz the corners with the flap wheel. Same thing on both. I'll clean up the face of each one so that I can get them ready for welding. Many of you are probably thinking, Steve, you imbecile. You have a plasma cutter right there. Why aren't you just using that? Well, okay, I heard you. So, basically, the plates that I made so far, the 4 holes, I think those are all gonna line up. However, I've made a little bit of a trace out here of kind of the outside footprint of each plate. I think there's gonna be a little bit of interference with where it bolts to the block. The passenger side, I think there's a little boss right above where the old motor mount plate bolts up. That's why it's shaped like a U right here. So I'm gonna try to really crudely recreate that right now. And then if I can get that mock-up fit on there, I'll quick flap wheel all the edges off of it, and then we can move on to the next step, cutting this pipe. Here it is. It is not that pretty. but I'm just gonna mock this up on the car quick. Yeah, it's pretty warm. Just to make sure that it bolts in and it clears everything around here. If not, I might have to go back in here and do a little bit more grinding. I know that this looks kind of haggard, but when you're cutting freehand with a plasma cutter, good enough is the best you're gonna get. So I'm gonna mock this up, see what else I gotta do. So if you look down here, sorry about the glare there. So I'm gonna make the same sort of adjustment mock-up on the other side for the driver's side mount. And then I will clean these up and get them ready for welding so that I can then mock up the piece of pipe and the bushing down there. All right, so I think what I'm gonna start with on these is I'm actually gonna tack the tabs that hold the bushing to the cross member. That way, that will give me an accurate place to measure from between the bushing and the plate that I made that sits on the side of the block. So I'm gonna get those zapped in on both sides, then I'll take some measurements and hopefully get those plate or a piece of pipe on both sides ready to mock up. Let's see here. If we're going, I don't know, it's a pretty rough estimate here. I'd say on this side, if we made our pipe piece at least 6 inches long and then put an angle and a cope on it. So maybe we'll go 7-inch on this side. And I'll check the other side. We'll go 7-inch on passenger side and we'll go 5-inch on driver's side. 7 and 5. All right, so any of you guys that might be trying to do, motor mounts like this or any sort of tube work or whatever, they make really nice tubing notchers and stuff to be able to cope the edge of this pipe to, like, say, this sleeve. Now, if you don't have a pipe notcher, tubing notcher, whatever, if you don't want to buy one, another trick that I just tried that actually works pretty good. It may not be perfect, so whatever, use this if you want to. I actually saw this watching Laura Kampf on YouTube. She's a designer, builder, she's from Germany, but she's got some really neat ideas, and I saw her do this once. So all you need is the pipe that you're gonna mark or cope. I'm using a magnet over here to hold it in place, and then I have the bushing sleeve that I'm gonna weld it to. Then I have a washer and a Sharpie. All you do is you set that washer on top. You set that washer on top of the pipe, and you put your Sharpie tip in there, hugging the inside edge of that washer, and you walk it around either side until you get a line that will show you what the cope needs to be. So I don't know how well you guys can see that, but now I have a line of where to cope or fish mouth this pipe. So I'm gonna flip it over 180 degrees, do the same thing on the other side, mark the other end. I'm sorry, not the other end, sorry. I only need to cope one side. I'm gonna flip this over, mark this side, cope it, and then get the angle right to weld it to the plate in the engine bay. So just a cool tip I wanted to share with you guys. Hopefully it's helpful. If you wanted to make this cope deeper, you could use a larger washer that would offset your mark. So for example, I'll show you guys the same trick with a really big washer right here. If I shove my Sharpie in there and I run it around either side, now I get a similar coping mark. Get a similar coping mark, but it's just further up the pipe, so that would be like a deeper cope. I'm just gonna do the little bit at the end there. I think that'll work fine for me to get this thing seated all the way down. So I'm gonna flip this over, mark it, and we'll catch back up after I get something mocked up. Now these are just tacked up, so I'm gonna pop the sleeves out of both of these. I'm gonna weld these up fully, and then I can drop the cross member back out of the car and finish up welding the tabs on the cross member. But that looks like pretty much it. So I'm gonna put you guys on time lapse and really quick zap these together. Or a fabricator, and I don't pretend to be, but these welds, while they look a little sooty, these actually turned out pretty good. And this is just using my MIG gun, you know, nothing fancy here, but I think those two will be plenty strong enough to hold a KA in a Datsun. So I think that's where I'm going to end this video. It's late, I'm sweaty and covered in metal shavings. So I want to say to those of you that continue to watch the videos and subscribe, that's awesome. If you're not subscribed, please hit that button. Give me a shot. I think you'll like what I got going on here. There's a lot more cool stuff coming. We're up to 90 subscribers now. We are 10 away from 100. So when we hit 100, I want to do something fun. I'm not sure exactly what that's going to be. But anyway, that's it for the Datsun. Thank you all so much for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. We'll see you in the next one.